Funny how certain smells or sounds can take you right back. This morning I was making myself a cup of tea, chamomile with just a bit of honey the way I like it, and as that steam came up it stirred something in me. Maybe it was the way the light hit the old table, or maybe that soft hum of the radio. They were playing the Supremes, Stop in the Name of Love. I hadn't heard that song in ages. And just like that, I was 21 again. 1965, Springfield, Illinois. I can still see that little apartment I had, barely big enough for a bed and my sewing machine. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And back then, every dollar counted. I was working days as a secretary down at the insurance office, Mr. Crandall's place, and most nights I'd sit by that sewing machine till my fingers ached. I'd hem dresses, fix buttons, sometimes make whole blouses for the girls in the dorm. It wasn't glamorous, Lord knows, but a girl had to do what a girl had to do. And after all these years, I still remember the first time I had $1,000 to my name. 1,000. You might not think that's much nowadays. You can't even buy a nice coat for that anymore. But back then, for a young gal on her own, it felt like the whole wide world had cracked open. Now, sugar, if you don't mind me saying, if you enjoy sitting a spell with me here, maybe give this old story a little thumbs up or leave me a note down below. I do love hearing from folks. Makes these quiet afternoons feel a bit less lonely. Anyhow, that first 1,000. Funny how that's been on my mind today. Maybe because the world's moving so fast now, folks don't take time to remember those little victories, the ones that shaped who we are. You see, that money, it wasn't just bills in an envelope. It was pride. It was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. And truth be told, if it hadn't been for that first 1,000, I'm not sure I'd have ever finished my schooling. And without that, well, life might have turned out very different. So, if you've got a moment, come along with me. I'd like to tell you how a young gal from a tiny town earned her first $1,000 and what she did with it. You might be surprised. Well, to tell you how it all started, I guess I have to take you back a little further. I wasn't born in Springfield, No, I grew up in a tiny little town called Havana, right there in Illinois, not too far from the river. Oh, it was a small place, the kind where everybody knew everybody and news traveled faster than the mail. We lived in a little white house with green shutters, a front porch that creaked something awful, and a big old maple tree out front. Summers were hot and sticky, winters cold enough to freeze your toes off. My daddy worked at the mill, my mama kept the house, and us kids, well, we made do. We didn't have much, but we had enough, and looking back, I reckon that was plenty. I was a skinny little thing, always with my nose in a book or trying to make something out of scraps. Mama taught me to sew when I was about 10, sitting by her old Singer machine. She'd hum while she worked, and I'd watch her fingers dance over the fabric. I thought it was magic, the way she could turn a piece of cloth into something beautiful. Back then, I believed that kindness was the most important thing, and that folks always came back to you if you treated 'em right. I held on to that for a long time. I guess I still do. By the time I was 16, I knew I didn't want to stay in that little town forever. I wanted more, not just for me but for my folks, too. College seemed like a dream, one of those far-off things that other girls did, girls with money. But I was stubborn, always was. I figured if I worked hard enough, I could make it happen. After high school, I packed up what little I had and took the train to Springfield. First time I'd ever really left home. I was scared, sure, but more than that, I was determined. I started classes at the community college and picked up that secretarial job at the insurance office. It wasn't easy, not by a long shot. Rent wasn't cheap, books cost more than I expected, and there were days when supper was just a piece of toast and a cup of tea. But I kept at it. Nights, I'd haul out my sewing machine and take on whatever work I could find. Word got around, and soon enough, the girls from the dorms were knocking on my door with dresses that needed hemming or buttons to sew back on. I didn't mind. I liked the work. There was a kind of peace in it, the hum of the needle, the steady rhythm. And with each stitch, it felt like I was sewing a little piece of my future, one seam at a time. I had dreams back then. Simple ones, maybe, but they mattered to me. I wanted to finish school, get a good job, maybe travel a little. Mostly, though, I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it on my own. And in those quiet nights, bent over my sewing, I'd tell myself that no matter how hard it got, I wasn't gonna give up. Not ever. Well, one afternoon in late spring, I was walking back from the insurance office checking my watch because I had a pile of sewing orders waiting at home, and that's when I first saw him. He wasn't supposed to be there, leaning up against the brick wall of the building next door, fiddling with his guitar case like he was trying to figure out which tune to play next. His name was Jack, or that's what he told me when I stopped to ask if he needed directions. There was something in the way he tipped his hat, just a little crooked, that made me pause. He asked about the address I gave him, then asked me what I did for work, and when I told him I was a secretary at Crandall Insurance, he smiled like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. I didn't know whether to laugh or blush. I remember my heart skipping a beat, though, and I couldn't explain why. After I left, I found myself looking back over my shoulder, half expecting to see him there still. The next morning, I got a note slipped under my door at the sewing room, no signature, just a small drawing of a guitar and the words, "Thanks for the directions, friend. J." I tucked that note into my favorite cookbook and found myself grinning every time I opened it. But that wasn't all. A few days later, the dorm girls started chatting about a boy playing folk music on the corner of Cherry Street. They said he had a sweet voice and that he always looked for the girl who gave him directions. A rumor like that spread like wildfire, and soon I had 6 new orders for skirts and pillowcases before noon, simply because folks wanted to look nice when they went to hear Jack play. And just like that, something shifted. My little side gig felt more than just pocket money. It felt like a lifeline. Jack dropped by the sewing room one evening with a tin of fresh-baked cookies and asked if I'd stay a bit after I finished his sister's dress. He told me stories about his travels through small towns and big cities, about the musicians he'd met, and the songs he'd written, but all I could think about was the way his eyes lit up whenever he talked about a melody he was proud of. I felt the stirring inside me, a kind of excitement I'd never known, like I was on the brink of something I couldn't fully name yet. I'd been so focused on getting through each day, balancing work and school, that I'd never paused to wonder what might happen if I let myself dream a little bigger. That meeting with Jack and the arrival of that anonymous note became the spark that set everything in motion. Not only did more orders pour in because of the buzz he created on campus, but I also found the courage to raise my prices just a smidge, telling myself that my time and skill were worth it. And do you know what? Folks didn't bat an eye. They paid up, no questions asked, and some even tipped extra, saying they were happy to support a young woman chasing her goals. That unexpected turn, Jack's random presence on the sidewalk, his quiet thank you, and the ripple effect it caused, showed me that opportunities can come from the most unlikely places. It taught me that being open to chance encounters, to little acts of kindness or curiosity, can lead you down a path you never imagined. So that afternoon on Cherry Street, when I thought I was just helping a stranger, I had no idea I was lighting the fuse that would eventually lead me to my first big milestone, earning that $1,000 that felt like my whole world at the time. And truth be told, I wouldn't trade that moment for anything. That summer, just as things were beginning to look up, life decided to throw me a curveball I didn't see coming. I got a call one afternoon from my mama back in Havana. Daddy had taken ill, real bad, and the doctors weren't sure how much longer he had. That news hit me like a freight train. I'd been so caught up in my little world of classes, sewing, and daydreams about what might be, that I hadn't stopped to think about what was happening back home. Suddenly, all those dreams felt heavy, like they were anchored to a place I couldn't reach. I wanted to drop everything and be there for my family, but I was barely keeping my head above water as it was. The money was tight, and I was afraid that if I left, I wouldn't be able to come back to school, or worse, I'd lose the sewing orders I relied on to make ends meet. Friends at the dorm tried to be supportive, but it wasn't the same as having family nearby. Jack, well, he offered kind words and a shoulder when I needed it, but even he couldn't fully understand the weight I was carrying. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling this gnawing sense of fear and helplessness. I was scared of losing Daddy, scared of what would happen to Mama and the kids if he was gone. I felt ashamed too, ashamed that I was so caught up in my own little bubble that I hadn't been there when they needed me most. It was a battle inside, that much I know. On one side was my duty, my love for my family pulling me home. On the other, my stubborn heart held tight to the promise I made myself to finish school, to carve out a future that would lift us all up. I didn't know how to have both, and that tore me up inside. Some days, I'd find myself snapping at Jack or the girls at the dorm, lashing out at the people who only wanted to help. I felt alone, even in a crowded room. There were whispers from some folks at work too, questioning whether a young woman like me should be trying to do all this on her own. Too much on her plate, they'd say, or maybe she should settle down instead of chasing dreams. Their words stung more than I wanted to admit, but the truth was, I couldn't give up now. I couldn't let fear or judgment stop me from fighting for the life I wanted. So I kept going, one stitch at a time, one day at a time. Every paycheck was a little victory. Every hem finished a small rebellion against the doubts and the heartache. That summer was hard, harder than any I'd known before, but it shaped me. It taught me what it meant to be resilient, to keep moving even when the world feels like it's falling apart. And it made that first $1,000 all the sweeter, because it wasn't just money, it was proof I'd survived. I remember that day like it was yesterday, though the years have tried to soften the edges. It was late August, and the heat clung to the city like a heavy blanket. I had just finished a long day at the office, my hands still sore from sewing late into the night, when the call came. Mama's voice was trembling on the other end, fragile and full of pain. Daddy had passed away. The words hit me like a blow, and for a moment, I swear time stopped. I could hear nothing but the pounding of my own heart, loud and wild in my ears. I fell frozen, like the whole world had gone silent except for that terrible news. I wasn't sure if I was crying or just numb. The man who had been my rock, my first hero, was gone. And I was miles away, with only a few dollars saved up and a handful of dreams. That loss was like a fracture in my very soul. I remember sitting down on the creaky wooden floor of my apartment, clutching the phone as if it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I wanted to scream, to run home, to hold Mama and my brothers close, but the reality was that I was alone in that big city, and the bills weren't going to pay themselves. I think that was the moment I truly understood what it meant to grow up, not just in age, but in spirit. The safety net of childhood was gone, and all that was left was the raw, aching responsibility of adulthood. I felt angry too. Angry that life had dealt such a harsh hand. Angry that I couldn't be there to say goodbye, to help hold the pieces together. But beneath that anger was a quiet, stubborn flame that refused to be snuffed out. I realized then that if I gave up, if I let grief swallow me whole, I would be letting down not just myself, but my whole family. So, with tears still fresh on my cheeks, I made a promise to keep going, to finish what I'd started. That $1,000 I had earned from my sewing wasn't just money anymore. It was a lifeline, a symbol of hope, a way to build something lasting out of heartbreak. The pain of losing Daddy changed me. It made me stronger, yes, but also more careful. I learned to carry my sorrow quietly, like a secret burden that shaped my every step. And though the world kept spinning and the days marched on, I carried that moment with me, that sudden, devastating loss, as a reminder of how precious and fragile life really is. It was a turning point, the line between who I was and who I had to become. And every time I think back on that summer day, I remember how time seemed to stop, just for a heartbeat before I picked myself up and kept moving forward. After Daddy passed, the world around me seemed to grow quieter, as if all the colors had faded into a muted gray. The busy hum of Springfield didn't stop, but I felt like I was moving through it behind a glass wall, watching life go on without me really being part of it. The apartment, once a place of hope and hustle, felt colder and emptier than ever. Nights were the hardest, the silence pressing in, memories flooding back, and that aching sense of loss gnawing at my chest. I'd sit by the window, staring out at the streetlights flickering on one by one, wondering how I was supposed to carry on. The sewing machine, once a symbol of my dreams and independence, became a reminder of what I'd lost. Some days I couldn't bring myself to touch it at all. I questioned everything, my strength, my purpose, even my faith in people. I wondered if the kindness I believed in was just a fairy tale, if the world was a place where good things could truly last. Friends tried to reach out, but it felt like I was underwater, distant and unreachable. Jack's visits became less frequent, and I couldn't blame him. I was no longer the girl who smiled easily or talked about hopeful plans. I was a shadow of the woman I'd been, wrapped in quiet sorrow. Yet, despite the heaviness, there was a small, stubborn spark deep inside that refused to die out completely. I found myself telling that spark stories, reminding it of the dreams I once had and the promise I made to finish school. Slowly, with small, hesitant steps, I began to find my way again. The road was lonely, and some nights I cried myself to sleep, but I learned that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about carrying the pain alongside the hope, learning to live with both. Life had changed me, made me more cautious, quieter, but also stronger in ways I hadn't imagined. I wasn't the same young girl who'd arrived in Springfield with stars in her eyes, but maybe, just maybe, I was becoming someone who could weather any storm. There came a morning when, for the first time in a long while, I felt a little flicker of something I hadn't felt in months, a whisper of hope. It was a quiet day, the kind where the sunlight filters softly through the curtains and dust motes dance lazily in the air. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping my chamomile tea, when I heard a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Bennet from down the hall, an elderly lady with a gentle smile and a heart bigger than this whole town. She'd brought over a small bundle of freshly picked tomatoes from her garden, just because she knew I liked them. That simple kindness, that gesture of reaching out, stirred something in me. It reminded me that even when life feels heavy, there are still pockets of light, moments of connection that can pull you back from the edge. That day, I decided to take a small step. I offered to help Mrs. Bennet with her garden, something I hadn't done in years. Digging my hands into the earth, feeling the cool soil between my fingers, it felt like I was planting more than just seeds. I was planting a new beginning. Helping her gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning beyond just going to work or sewing late into the night. It made me realize that even in the darkest times, we can find ways to lift ourselves up by lifting others. That little garden became a symbol of hope, a quiet reminder that life goes on and grows, even after loss and hardship. Slowly but surely, I found myself thinking about my dreams again, not just as distant wishes, but as goals within reach. I began to take on more sewing orders, asked for a small raise at the insurance office, and even started talking to Jack more often, letting myself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was room for happiness after all. It wasn't a sudden transformation, no fireworks or grand declarations. It was more like a soft sunrise, the world gently waking up after a long night. That second chance, that new impulse, reminded me that life's journeys aren't straight lines. They twist and turn with stops and starts, and sometimes you have to fall apart a little before you can put yourself back together again. But the important thing is to keep going, to keep planting those seeds even when you can't yet see what'll bloom. I remember the day I finally made the choice, the kind of decision that settles deep into your bones and changes everything. It wasn't sudden, no dramatic lightning strike or thunderclap, just a quiet moment sitting on the old wooden porch swing, the evening breeze gentle against my face. I had been carrying so much weight for so long, grief, regret, fear like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. But that night, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, something inside me shifted. I realized that holding on to the past was only holding me back. The memories of Daddy, the pain of losing him, the struggles that followed, they were part of me, yes, but they didn't have to define my every breath. I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs like a promise, and I whispered to myself, I choose to live, not with bitterness or regret, but with open arms, without claims or complaints, just forward. It wasn't easy, this kind of acceptance. It meant forgiving myself for the moments I felt weak, for the times I doubted my worth. It meant letting go of what might have been and embracing what was still possible. That night, I took an old, worn photograph of Daddy and tucked it safely away in a box, not because I wanted to forget, but because I needed to make space for new memories. I decided to give up the tiny, drafty apartment that held too many shadows and move into a modest place with a bit more light, a place where I could breathe again. It was a symbolic step, but a real one. By letting go of the past, I was making room for myself, for my dreams, for my happiness, for a future that I could shape with my own two hands. From that day on, the sewing machine felt different beneath my fingers, no longer just a tool for survival, but a way to create, to express, to build something lasting. I began to see my life not as a series of losses, but as a tapestry woven with threads of resilience, hope, and love. And though the sorrow never fully disappeared, it softened, becoming a gentle reminder of how far I'd come. I learned that acceptance isn't about forgetting or giving up. It's about finding peace in the midst of change. It's about standing tall in the face of life's storms and saying, this is my story, and I choose to keep writing it. That night on the porch was my turning point. It was when I stopped running from my past and started walking toward my future. And, sugar, let me tell you, that made all the difference. Looking back now, with all these years behind me, I can see the path I walked with a clarity that only time can bring. The girl who came to Springfield all those years ago was full of hope and fire, eager to make her mark on the world, but she was also scared, uncertain, and weighed down by things she couldn't yet understand. What life taught me in its own slow and steady way is that strength doesn't mean never breaking. It means standing back up after you've been knocked down, sometimes over and over again. I learned that pain, loss, and hardship are part of the story we all carry, but they don't have to be the whole story. What matters is how you choose to move forward. There's a quiet kind of bravery in living your life on your own terms, in making choices that may not always be easy but feel true to your heart. It took me a long time to realize that the people who truly matter won't mind if you're not perfect. They'll love you for your struggles as much as your successes. And maybe most importantly, I understood that waiting for the right moment, for someone else's permission, for life to be easier, is the thief of dreams. We waste so much precious time hoping things will change without us having to change first. Maybe it's time, I think, to stop waiting, to take that first step, no matter how small, toward the life you want. Because if there's one thing my story shows, it's that even when the world feels heavy, even when the road ahead looks long and uncertain, there's always a way forward. You just have to find the courage to keep walking. So, to anyone listening, I say this: don't be afraid of the hard times. Don't let fear or doubt keep you stuck. You have more strength inside you than you realize. Life will throw its storms, but you have the power to weather them. And when you do, you'll find that the light you're looking for has been inside you all along. That's the truth I've come to hold close, the lesson I carry with me every day. And if my story can help even one person find their way a little clearer, well, then it's been worth telling. Well, here we are at the end of this little journey I've shared with you, and I hope you felt a bit of what I felt all those years ago: the hopes, the struggles, and the quiet victories that don't always make the headlines, but mean the world to someone like me. You know, this story isn't just about the past. It's about today, about all of us trying to find our place and hold on to what matters most. I often wonder about the things we hold on to in our hearts, memories, dreams, love. Sometimes I think about Jack, that boy with the crooked hat and the guitar, and I ask myself, did he ever really forget me? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but sometimes, in the quiet moments just before dawn, I swear I can feel his presence like a soft song carried on the breeze. And that makes me ask you, dear friend, what do you believe? Do you think true love has a way of coming back around? Is it something that lives on, quietly waiting to be found again? I don't have all the answers, but I do know this: life is full of surprises, and sometimes the most unexpected moments bring the greatest joys. So, as you go on with your day, I hope you carry a little of this story with you, the reminder that no matter where you've been or what you've faced, there's always a chance to start anew, to open your heart a little wider, and to believe in the magic of second chances. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, some things are meant to come back around. Maybe that love, that hope, that dream is still out there, waiting for you. Sometimes I think it's true. Sometimes I think Jack remembers me too.